So this year, my instruction is based on standards and not a resource. And that right there is a huge shift for me. I've always followed a resource in my math instruction. And so this year, diving into the standards and then letting my students set the pace for how I teach the standards has completely changed the way that my math time looks.
I agree. Before, I always had a book, and we went from page 1 to page 2 to page 3, lesson to lesson. And now it's all based on the kids' standards and how they do on a pretest and where I take them from there. I have my instructional groups are so much more focused and student-led based on their needs. And I just feel like their needs are being met so much more than they ever were before.
Well, and I would just add to that, it's much more individual that the kids are driving. We're still introducing and teaching the standards, but as far as how long a child chooses or needs to stay on something, we can do that with our individualized grouping.
Standards, we've learned just how important number sense is and how if students don't have a strong understanding of place value and about how numbers are made, then the other standards are so much more challenging. And so we've taken a lot more time to really make sure that our students have a strong foundation in number sense, that has also changed because before we would just go with the pacing of the resource, and so that's been huge for us.
Yeah, it didn't matter if a kid was proficient or not, we just kept on going.
So the biggest impact that I've seen on my students is their foundational skills, so their understanding of place value and how to compose and decompose numbers, and then also their strategies. My students can solve addition subtraction problems mentally with multiple digits, and it's amazing to see because they have a strong foundation of place value. They can picture taking numbers apart and in their minds and use that when they're adding and subtracting. And so I think just that strong foundation of place value has really been missing before in my instruction, and it's really neat to see it because now other concepts are coming to them so much easier since the adding and the subtracting the numbers isn't as difficult.
To kind of go along with that, I think when they use that mental math, they're able to explain their thinking so much more and better than they ever were, explaining different strategies they use to solve problems. I mean, they're talking like mathematicians all the time, so that's been really great to see as well.
And to expound on that is that they're able to justify and explain not only to an adult, but also to another child. And we hear a lot more of the vocabulary being spoken when they're playing games with each other. It's just a more open, more cohesive time in the classroom. For me personally, the biggest challenge is finding more for my game time resources that are free and that are more of that research based. They're good resources. Is coming up with that whole piece. But here and there we all have shared, so that's helped out quite a bit. But that's probably been my biggest challenge.
I would say my biggest challenge has just been reorganizing my math block because it's so much different than it was before. So finding out what works best for me, what works best for my students, and then also just them showing that they're proficient, because in the past it was so much pencil and paper, and so now them showing that they're proficient is through videos or just me working with them one-on-one. So kind of finding that reliable data and how I put that in to show that they are proficient and how they do that.
For me, the biggest challenge has been the management with the groups, and so keeping track of what a student's needs are and where that kind of fits in with my groups, and then doing that with all of my students, and then deciding exactly what I'm going to do on this day with each group when they're all in such different places. And then also knowing, okay, when do we just need to move on to other standards, and then do we actually need to keep coming back to this one, and just kind of knowing when to stop with a standard and when to move on to something else to make sure we get to everything else. So not having the pacing of the resource has also created good challenges as well. So
You have to be a lot more flexible about how, today is not going to look like tomorrow, and what you do today is going to change what you do tomorrow, and your groups and all that, and realizing that that's okay,
right.
and kind of letting that organizational structure, that tight structure, I guess, kind of letting that go a little bit.
Well, and even knowing that you move on to a new standard whole group, but you still have that flexibility to continue working on a standard with particular children who need it in your small group. So it's a lot more freedom. One of the biggest things and most powerful that we noticed is our data that we've been collecting through assessments, that our children are much stronger and achieving proficiency or close to proficiency a lot faster than they have in the past. We even noticed this data starting in December, and it's just been amazing what the results are showing.
A couple of weeks ago, at one of our staff meetings, our library media specialist had interviewed students, asking them what their favorite part of Ridgeview was, what their favorite thing about our school is. And in the videos, kids said all kinds of different things, and a student from my class said that his favorite thing about school is math. And I think that pretty much speaks volumes of the changes that I've made this year with math instruction, and just how he feels successful, and he feels like it's more personalized for him. And I think that's really cool.
Right, so we're definitely going to continue number talks from the very beginning of this school year, because we've seen so much improvement with their ability, with their mental math, and being able to explain their thinking. So that's something we want to start from the very beginning. And then we also want each student to have their own math folder that kind of has, does have all of our second grade standards in there listed out, so that when they take an assessment, they're able to go through, mark off where they're proficient, and then they can confer with us about their next steps and what they want to work on, so they can achieve all of their math goals for second grade.
Me personally, I would like to go more of like the personalization route, as far as like having students really use those folders to take ownership of their goals, and like know exactly where they're at in the learning process, and handing over some of that responsibility to them, where it's not just me deciding which activities they choose and how they go about learning the skills they need to learn, but really giving them the skills to own their learning. And with that, I think comes a lot of like setting it up in the beginning, like knowing where I'm going with personalization, and I'm excited for that. I'm excited to give them more ownership and teach them those skills starting more from the beginning of the school year.
We also talked about, as a group, that we're lucky enough to get 5 more minutes added to our math time next year, and we talked about increasing our reflection time and making it more purposeful. One thing we have learned this year is not just us doing the teaching, that the kids, whether in group time or small group time, and we just feel this is another area where kids can celebrate what they've learned, and also possibly help another student who may be struggling with something hear a different idea or a different way to do something. So we're going to increase that time at the end of the